Hi Soundies, welcome to our Sound for Video session on the 17th of December 2023. It's great to have you all here. I hope you're doing well. It looks like we're getting some, maybe some slightly winterish weather in some parts of the country. We are just at, evidently we're at 37 degrees Fahrenheit here now. Dry winter so far. Actually, technically not winter, but nevertheless, good to have you all here. Let's jump on over to our agenda and we'll take a look here. Question. Robert, I know, has asked some questions, as have others, about how to use the Zoom F6 specifically when it comes to file management and metadata. So we're going to kind of take a closer look at that today here on the Zoom F6. A lot of these principles apply. I mean, obviously the specific buttons you push are going to be different on different recorders, but a lot of these concepts apply across field recorders. So hopefully is useful even if you're not a Zoom F6 user yourself. Also, just a reminder, these are the whole Sound for Video sessions. The reason we started them and the reason we continue to do them, well, we continue to do them for a number of reasons, but the reason we originally started them was that we have online courses over at school.learnlightandsound.com. And we have a Zoom F6 course amongst lots of others. With MixPre course, we have a course about sound for live streaming. We have a lighting course because it is Learn Light and Sound after all. So that's the reason we originally started these, to give a kind of a place for people to ask questions, whether they could attend live or not. If you're signed up at the school, I send out an email usually on the Saturday before the stream, which is on Sunday, and let you know what the topic is. If you have questions, you can just email me back and we'll cover those questions. So even if you're not there, we can get your question covered. So that's kind of the main idea behind these, just as a reminder. And also, this is a workshop. It's not a scripted presentation. I do use a teleprompter so I can look at you and also see the information I need to, like the agenda here, but I don't read off of a script. This is just a chance for us to get together, work through things. We make plenty of mistakes along the way. It's all part of the learning process. So again, today we'll talk about the Zoom F6 file management, and then we do have a couple of items that were submitted ahead of time, so we'll go to those in just a minute. Okay. Let's jump over to the overhead camera, take a look at our Zoom F6 here. So here we have this set up here. Maybe just move this over a touch, something like that. Okay, so Zoom F6, amazing little recorder. Currently, by the way, on sale for $650 US. And 6 microphone / line inputs, 3 on this side, 3 on the other side. Could be used as a production sound recorder. I think on the big films, of course, you're going to see people using bigger units than this, but the nice thing about this is very small, very compact. And when I talked to Samuel Green over at Zoom when they first announced it, I said, well, Samuel, that's a super interesting recorder, but wow, it's awfully small. Might be a little tricky to use in a bag. And he said, well, one of the main use cases we thought for this is with its 32-bit float recording capability, that it could fill the role very nicely, even for production sound mixers working in film and television, big budget stuff, as a car drop or a trunk drop type of recorder. So something you could set up, mic up the car, press record while you're in 32-bit float mode, and the car goes off and they do their filming. And you're probably going to be in a pretty good spot. If you've positioned your mics carefully, you're not going to be in a position where, you misset the trim or the gain and you come back with a bunch of clipped audio. So that was one example he cited as probably a primary use case for the professional users. But for those of us that are getting started, this is a relatively affordable way to get into a mixer and recorder that does a lot of stuff. So again, not perfect, but it does record great audio. And in my mind, what makes it more challenging for big production jobs is just the fact that the control area is so tiny. Sadly, Zoom has also discontinued, I believe, their FRC8, the F control, which was a little control surface with linear faders, and it allowed you to also connect a keyboard so you could type in things, type in metadata, name files, name tracks, things like that. Unfortunately, you're going to probably have to go look on the used market to get one of those at this point, but it is a nice addition. But all of that aside, let's talk about how you go about doing this. And so just as a starting point, let's come on into the menu here, and I'm going to come out to the Finder. Oops, come into the Finder. Obviously, we have our SD card. There's just a single SD card here. One of the things to consider is that when you are in these menus here, so you have the menu button here, the check mark button or enter button here, and then up and down, and then you have your transport controls down here. One pattern that's really important to understand is if you long press the enter or the check button, that will usually bring you something else. So if I just quick press it, it just goes into that item. But if I long press it, it gives me basically like a contextual menu, a menu for that particular item that was highlighted. So here I could select this and say, hey, I want to record or play back the audio that is in that particular item. Here I can also create a sound report. So at the end of my recording session, if I want to actually put a list out of all the metadata and all the files that I've recorded, which tracks were recorded on each one, this is a way I can do that. And then there's also this info here. This is where this just gives me info about the SD card in this particular case. Okay, so let's come back out. Let's go into the SD card. Now, by default, you will have two main folders. You'll have a trash folder and you'll have a false take folder. So if you delete a file from the UI here, it will go to the trash. And if you do a false take, it will go into this folder. Let me explain the concept of a false take. So sometimes when you're on set, and this is in the context largely of narrative film, possibly commercial, even in anything where you're doing multiple takes within scenes. And a false take, sometimes what happens on set is, for whatever reason, things get rushed. People make mistakes, including the production sound mixer. You may accidentally press record and then realize, hey, camera hasn't started rolling yet. That was a false take. We're going to need to stop, and I need to reset my my take number. And so the way that works here is if I come out here, and let's just do a recording really quickly. So I'm just recording. Incidentally, I'm going to go ahead and drop a marker there and keep going. And just for future use here, we're going to drop a marker there as well. All right, so now we have that recording. Let's say, oh, you know what? That was a false take. We're not actually going to use that one. So if you want to mark that as a false take and reset the take number, the way you do that is you press and hold the menu button, and you press, and then until the file name turns red, and then you press the down button. So you want to move the false take back to the false take folder. So what we can do is just choose execute. Okay, that's good. Now you'll notice when we press record again, it'll be jungle 001. 001 is the take number in this case. So it's jungle 1, 001. Jungle 1 is our scene, 001 is our take. So that's how you do what is called a false take. Again, if I just come back out, I just press and hold the menu button and press down. And then it'll ask me if I want to really do that. We'll go ahead and say yes. Now, you'll notice if we come into our Finder and we go into the false take folder, we now have actually three versions, because I actually did this earlier. The false take. And so I can come in here and it'll actually still save that file on the SD card. So if you made a mistake there as well, it's not actually deleting it. It's going to keep it in that false take folder if you need to come back to it for whatever reason. So that's a pretty cool feature. Really important one to know, because I know I've been on set before and I'm like, oh, false take, how do I reset the take number? Oh no. Now, on the bright side, if for whatever reason you do need to do that, reset the take number, you can press and hold the menu button. If you're out here on the main screen, press and hold the menu button until it highlights the file name in red, and then press up. And you can actually change the take number. So you can add one or subtract one to the take. So if you do need to change that take number for whatever reason, that option is available as well. Okay. Now, you'll notice that our scene is called Jungle 1. How do we set that? If we come into the menu here and we come down to the Record menu, we have this metadata submenu. So we're going to come into that. And here we can choose our scene name. We can add notes, and we can also create track names. So let's start with the scene name. Pop in here. We have a couple of different modes that we can use. We can use the current date. If we want to just name our files based on the current date, we can do that. If you want to name them based on the current folder, you can do that. So you can actually create folders for each scene and then have the files within those folders named based on the name of the folder. That's another one. Or you can just create a username. So let's go ahead and do the current folder. And if we wanted to use a username, we would come in here and we can edit it here. And we can also go down to history. Now, the reality is that using this very tiny interface, it's kind of hard to enter text, to be honest. But you can also create this. It automatically creates a history as you create a new item for that particular list here. So if I create a new username for a scene, it will actually save that in my history, and I can change it. So here's what the interface looks like if I wanted to edit that one. And I have to use the up and down keys here to scroll around, and then I use the transport keys to move left and right. So stop to move left, play, pause to move right. And then I use the check key, or the enter key, of course, to select something. Okay. So that's where we're at there. Now, if I want to create a new folder, let's say I'm at the start of my day, and we're going to be doing a few different scenes. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create a new folder. I just scroll down to new folder, select new folder, and let's say that the name of our first scene is going to be called the jungle scene. So we're just going to call this jungle here. So you can see how amazing the process is here for entering. It's a little bit tedious, but it's doable. We're all.
We already have jungle.
I know but we're creating the folder called jungle.
Oh, okay.
So Danny called out that we already have jungle, but what we have was we were already set the scene name to jungle. Now we're actually naming this folder jungle. So there's G-U-N-G. Now I need L, which is here, and E, which is here. Whoops. E. Okay, cool. So that means that I come down here, press OK. Now here it asks me if I want to reset the take number. This is the start of my day. So yes, I do want to reset the take number. So that's going to make it so that my first recording is going to be take 001. So I'm going to go ahead and press execute. And there we go. So now we have a folder called jungle. Okay, now remember, if I come back here to the record menu and to metadata, the scene name, we set it up so that we're going to use the current folder. So what I need to make sure of is that when I go back into my Finder, I need to make sure that I have jungle selected as my current folder. That's what the little blue check mark is. If I wanted to select a different folder, what I would have to do, and I don't know if you can select, let's create another folder here, and let's just call this one maybe test or something like that. T-E-S-T. Okay, come down, whoops. Come down here. Okay, now we have a folder named test now. Now you can see test is selected, but let's say I don't actually want to use that one. I want to use jungle. So what I do is long press, and then I choose select and press. And again, we can go ahead and reset the take number. Okay, now you'll notice here, when I come back into my Finder, jungle is the one selected. So when I do my next recording, that file is going to go into the selected folder, which is called jungle. And because I set my scene name mode to use the name of the folder for the scene, as a scene name, it should name our first recording jungle 1. Ooh, actually, let's see what it does. Is it going to say jungle 1 underscore 001 or just jungle underscore 001? Let's go ahead and record and see what happens here. Okay, it just does jungle 001. So in this case, we're not numbering the scenes necessarily because I use the name of the folder as the scene name. So there we go. So that's jungle. That's the name of our scene, take number 1. Now when I do my next recording, automatically it goes to take number 2. Okay, so it automatically increments for you. So those are kind of the very, very high level. Let's switch back over to the main camera and let's go to the chat and see if we have any questions so far. Don't want to move too quickly here if we Okay, Daniela, problem, the recordings in F6 are much more better if I listen to them inside the recorder. After import to DaVinci Resolve, much less quality. Can you demonstrate the different import formats? I have not experienced that, Danielle, but special ORTF import from Zoom recordings. Okay, so I don't I don't want to get us off track and talk about ORTF or stereo recordings here necessarily, but let me just quickly address your question. So if we go back to the overhead camera, in terms of the settings I use, so in the recording here, I usually record 24-bit. If you need 32-bit float, of course, you can do that. You set your sample rate. Usually for video, I'm doing 48 kilohertz. And then file format is where you come in here. What this means, poly means that you're going to get, for each time you press the record button, you will get one file, regardless of the number of tracks that you're recording. So if you're recording 4 tracks plus the left and right mix, it will put all of those in a single file as a multi-track file, a poly wave file. If, on the other hand, you change to mono stereo, when you press record, it will create a separate file for each track that you have enabled in a recording. So you'll get, when you press record once, if you have 4 tracks enabled plus the left and right mix, you will get 6 files each time you press record. So that's what that is. And here I would say as well, so obviously I'm assuming you're recording in I assume you're recording in a wave format. So that's going to be any of the top. It's going to be anything on this list except for MP3. So if you're recording in MP3, I would recommend against that if you're looking for highest quality. I'm assuming that you already are doing that. But I've never found a situation where the recording sounded great in here but sounded awful in DaVinci Resolve. So I'm not sure, exactly what the situation is there. But those are just some thoughts there as far as recording format and how I would approach that. Okay. Robert, 2 questions for Zoom. When are you going to port the F8 Android app to the F6? Okay, these are not questions for me, either for Zoom Incorporated. Okay, so it's an interesting question, Robert, because I believe for the Zoom F8, they have both Android and iOS apps, but for the F6, they only have an iOS app. So I think that's the basis of Robert's question first. And then why not upgrade firmware to allow you to plug in a keyboard directly to the F6, or maybe through Bluetooth? Both great questions, especially in light of the fact that the F8 control, or the F control surface has been discontinued. That would be a really nice addition, is to be able to plug in a keyboard. Or a hub. I mean, ideally, I'd like to be able to plug in a hub and power the unit, plus I'd be able to plug in a keyboard at the same time. Even better. I'll add to your question there, Robert. So, fair questions. Okay. Lauren, I do a lot of location production. Think a wedding on a mountaintop. I need a field recorder mixer with EQ. I can only think of the Sound Devices 8 series. Can I get any EQ other than high-pass filter on the F6? Natively, no. It doesn't have any other sort of EQ, unfortunately. It would be a nice addition. But no, that's the only thing they've got. Ronnie asks, how would you rate or compare the preamps of the F6 towards other similar products, not only on a better or worse scale, since audio quality has so many different parameters that define its quality? I find and this is actually true of all of the current F series, so the F6 and the F8N and the F8N Pro. I think they're very capable preamplifiers. I think they're optimized primarily for dialogue recording. They sound, I would say, the negative way of putting it is they sound clinical. But I think another more positive way of saying that is they sound very true to life. They don't tend to overemphasize any particular frequency to my ear, so they seem fairly even. I think they're great preamplifiers. I like them. Compared to a Sound Devices MixPre, they're very, very similar. The MixPre has a touch more low-end response, it seems like, so they sound warmer on the MixPre, but it's very, very subtle, and most audiences wouldn't notice right off the bat. You have to play them right next to each other to really, really hear that difference. Yeah, that's how I would probably characterize them. I like them. I think they're very capable, and you can record great sound with them. Matt, she just woke up. The grandchild have to go. Merry Christmas to the judge. Thank you so much, Matt. That's very kind of you. Thank you for the super chat. And it's great to have you here, and hope you have a great time with your granddaughter. All right. Oh, all this is done in one file as multi, and here caused the problem inside DaVinci. 32-bit float, 3 channels on the recorder, and I get 4. It's a 3-channel recorder, I get 4. Okay. Yeah, it's a puzzle. We, if you want to email me, Danielle, we can talk about the particulars. If you've got a file you could share, perhaps, I'm happy to take a look at it and see what we can do. All right, Shoji, a little off topic. Does the MixPre 6 allow the selection of the file type, poly or mono stereo, like the Zoom F6? I don't believe it does. I believe it's all poly wave file. So you don't get that option. I prefer, personally, polywave files. Others, I think, prefer not to have them in the same file. I think largely, to be honest, that's an issue of not knowing how to break things into mono tracks within your DAW. If you're doing all the work yourself, both production and post, you just need to learn how your DAW allows you to break them out separately, and every DAW does pretty much. So I prefer the polywave file because then you have all of the recordings for a single take in a single file, so you're not having to go search all over for them. Personal preference, but anyway. Would you be comfortable walking on a Pro set with an F6 buried in a bag? Depends on what you mean by Pro set. I personally wouldn't. I have enormous hands, and I have other options available to me. So it's as an educator and a video education professional, I have several recorders available to me. It wouldn't be my first choice in a bag, honestly. But again, like I said, it's probably the most affordable recorder with its capabilities on the market and the highest quality. So I'm an owner of a Zoom F6. I paid my own money for it. I love it. But if I've got a chance to use something, I would prefer a Zoom F8N Pro, honestly, on set over an F6. Ergonomically, it's just easier to work with, from a bag in particular. But can it be done? Ask Robert Harker. I think that's what he uses as his recorder, and I think it can be done. So just learning these principles. It's a little trickier because there are buttons. There are relatively few controls, and the controls are you have to remember some basically button shortcuts to really kind of be able to move around quickly with them. So that's, I think, is one of the key things with the Zoom F6. I feel like you have to invest a little bit more, make sure you understand all of those, the ways to get around quickly. And once you do that, I think it's absolutely capable. You could use it on a Pro set. Like I said, you're not going to see it on a big budget TV or film set, most likely as a primary recorder, but certainly as an auxiliary recorder on those sets, perhaps, or on a smaller production, much smaller budget production. Okay. All right, we ready to go back to the overhead? Okay, let's see where we're at here. All right, let's go ahead and do another recording here, just so that I can show you a couple more things. And like I did before, I'm going to go ahead and drop some markers in there. And because that'll just be something that we'll demonstrate here a little later. Okay. And then when I'm done recording, I press stop. I currently have it set. You can set this play pause button or the markers to have a different behavior. If you want it to pause and drop a marker at the same time, which is how I currently have it set, and I believe that's the default, you press the play pause button and it drops a marker there in metadata in that file, so you can see it in your digital audio workstation in post. It also pauses the recording. If you don't want it to pause, you can set it to that as well. And I believe that's going to be in the... Oh, where was that? I think it's in the key setting. Yeah, play key. It's right here. Play key option. You can change that so that it just leaves a marker and it doesn't pause. Or you can tell it to pause only, don't leave a marker. Or you can tell it to pause and leave a marker. So typically, I'll be honest, I would probably prefer marker only. And that will do it so that when we're going through here, when I press the play button during a recording, it's just dropping a marker. It keeps recording, drops a marker, puts that into metadata on the timeline, and then when you bring it into your DAW, that marker is there. Really useful, especially for podcasts, but it can be for other things as well. If for whatever reason you want to drop a marker to remind yourself of something that happened during the recording and make it easy to find, especially if you're doing longer recordings. So just a little something there. All right, let's go back into our Finder and see what it's been doing through all these recordings we've been making. So if I go into the Finder, into our Jungle folder, we now have 4 different takes. If I want to get the information on a particular take, like Jungle 4, I just press and hold the check button, the enter button, and I can take a look at the marker list. So you can see we left 1 marker in that particular file. And in fact, if we come back and go to Jungle 3, I think this was the, Jungle 3, I think this is the one where we left a couple of different markers there. So you can see, and it tells you where you left those markers as well. Neat little feature there. Okay, back into here. We've already selected it, so long hold to get into the contextual menu. Here's where we can actually rename the file if we needed to. So if we want to call it something else, this is where we do that. We can also edit some of the metadata. So here, for example, I can leave a note, and I can leave a note based on something I had in history. So I could say, oh, hey, this is a good take, or this is a bad take, or this is a scratch take. We don't want to use this one. You could say, hey, we didn't slate at the start. We did the tail slate, which means we slated at the end, use the little clapperboard at the end. Or, oh, we forgot, or for whatever reason, we didn't do a slate. Or maybe there was a plane that flew overhead or some sort of environmental noise. Those are the things I currently have in history. But you can edit and create your own as well. If you wanted to come in here and make a customized note for yourself, you could do that. And that all gets embedded into the file's metadata so that when you come into post-production or when you're making the sound report on your F6, all of those go into the notes field. So that's pretty handy as well. You can modify the scene and take if you wanted to, and that's what you do here for this particular file. You can circle the take. Usually a circled take is if the director says, that was it, that's the one we're going to use. You can come in here and circle that so that the post-production team is aware, hey, that's the one that the director called as the circled take, the one that we want to keep. All right, we have some other metadata here. We can go old school. We can record a tape name. There's also a project name. We can come in here and change those here. Again, we can also come in and change the tracks. Okay, so track names. Let's actually go back to, you can change it here, but if I am actually going to set my recorder up at the start of the day, I can come into the record mode, down to metadata, and I can name the tracks right here. So each of the individual 6 inputs can have a separate track name. And this is really useful, especially if you are going to generate a sound report at the end for post-production, to be able to put in here something more descriptive than track 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So here, for example, I actually would mark input number 1 as my boom mic. So I'm going to go ahead and choose that. So now it's set to boom mic. So what that means is if I come in here and do a recording, now we're on take 5, Jungle take 5. Here we go. Okay, we'll stop it there. Now if I come into the Finder and we go into Jungle, we're on take 5. I'm going to long press to get in there. I can look at the metadata and look at track names, and you can see track number 1 is now called Boom. So in my digital audio workstation, when I bring in this poly wave file with all these different tracks, in this case I only have 1 track, but if I also had lavaliers for 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, when I could even name them after the actors or the character names, whatever is most useful to you or the post-production team, you can do that. So that's a pretty nice feature as well. Okay. Now, let me just refer to my notes here really quickly. What I want to cover as well is I want to talk about incrementing scenes. Okay. All right, so if I want to go to the next scene, and I just want to, for example, here, if I'm using the name of if I've set the name of my files to the overall project, the overall, say I'm working on a short film, and say Jungle is going to be the kind of the working name for my short film, and I just want to call the scenes by numbers, there's another thing I can do here. I can go and press and hold the menu button, and then press the check button, and this is going to ask if I want to create a scene folder. So I want to create a new scene folder, so I'll press yes, and done. Let's see what it did. Oh, and it also wants to ask if I want to reset the take number. Since I'm starting a new scene, I do want to. Okay, so now if I come into the Finder, what has it done for us here? Now it's created a new folder called Jungle 1. So that's how you increment those. So if I wanted to come back here and let's say, now I'm ready to go to the next scene, again, press and hold the menu button, press the little check mark here, tell it, yes, I do want to create a scene folder, and yes. Oh, didn't ask me if I needed to reset the take. Again, if I come into the Finder now, we have Jungle 1, and Jungle 2. So that's how I can quickly increment to the next scene. And again, since we are naming these based on the folder names, the first take within Jungle 2, let's just test here to make sure, should be called Jungle2_001. So let's see what happens. If I go ahead and pop back out, make a recording. Yep, Jungle2_001 is exactly what it called it. So that's how we can increment our scenes and move on to the next scene pretty quickly there. Okay, now if you are doing it, yeah, that's how you increment the scenes. So let's pause there, come back to the main camera and see what questions we have in the chat here. All right, Brady, when I put a note on a take and then have to put another note on another take, say 5 or 10 takes later, I see that my initial note is still occupying the note spot. I hope that helicopter did not get written to multiple takes. Okay, well, we can test that. Let's go ahead and come in here. We're going to go into our Finder. And let's go into Jungle. Actually, we didn't record anything in Jungle 1. Let's go to the original Jungle. And let's long press on Jungle 1 and let's add a note here. So we're going to go to metadata. We're going to leave a note here. And I'm going to say plain overhead. Okay. Now let's come back out here to Jungle 2 and our first Jungle 201 recording. Whoops. What I need to do is long press, come to metadata, note. It has nothing in here for me, so I'm going to go ahead and choose. In this case, I'm going to say this was a good take. Okay, so if I come back to that other one, back in Jungle 1, let's see if it's changed it. Note. Nope, still says plain overhead. So hopefully that's generally how it should work. I don't know if that's what you were doing there, but it looks like it's working okay on this one here. So might need a little bit more information there on how you're making that change, but in theory, that's how it should work there. The Tech Preacher, I have the Zoom F8N Pro for home production, and I use the Zoom F6 for solo outside filming. That seems like a good kind of breakout for those two. The F6 definitely has its limitations and quirks, but definitely has saved my bacon on a few occasions where only minimal equipment was allowed. Yeah, it does have its use cases for sure. Don't anyone take it as me being overly critical. I was just saying, based on that previous question about, how do you feel about this as a bag recorder? It can work. Is it the optimal choice for that? Maybe not, but in this, again, at its price point, if that's what you can afford, then yeah, I think you can make it work. I would probably look at I know Zoom they made a bag for the F6. I'd probably look at that because it's traditional sound bags tend to be a little bit bigger, and this kind of gets lost in there, and it's a little bit difficult to operate. But there are ways you can make it work for sure, and it fits different workflows. I think you can hold down the fast forward button to circle as well. Oh, okay, so let's just do that. We press the fast forward button, circled. Good call. Yes, there are a whole bunch of different keyboard shortcuts. In fact, if we come down to System, onto Settings, Key Settings, and here's a shortcut list. So if you're ever wondering what those are, right here on the device, it'll tell you what those are. If you just need a reminder. So there it is, circle is you hold the fast forward button. Good call there, Reddy. Thanks for that. F6 is my recorder. Overall, fine tool. I completely agree. Robert says, yeah, Zoom F6 is prosumer gear like most of the rest of my gear. Prosumer versus professional is a matter of budget. Since I do not charge, I have very limited budget. Totally makes sense and it seems like the perfect recorder given those circumstances. Absolutely. Does this have Slate tone and built-in time code? Marvin, yes, it does. It has both. Let me just show you Slate here. If we go to the overhead camera. So, well, there are different ways to do it. So on the output, you know what? This is a good test for me. It's been a while. I know on the output, on the line out, let's see here. I think you can come into this screen here and you can turn on the Slate tone. How does that work? Oh, there we go. Okay, so now that's only on the output though, so that's not probably what you want. My recollection is that you can. It's been a while. I apologize. I don't know off the top of my head where that is. But if anyone out there remembers where that is, if you could please let Marvin know. I can check here in my documentation. It might just be on the output, come to think of it. Yeah, it might just be on the output. So that could be the case there. Okay. Actually, very impressive for $650. This is perfect for a one-man band, beginning location, sound person, YouTube, etc., etc. Completely agree. Yeah, especially for like YouTube, if you're recording in a studio, this is what an amazing tool it is. Steve, how many internal batteries does the F6 use, and what's the battery life like? Well, actually, if we go back to the overhead camera, it actually has a Sony NPF or L series mount on the back, so you can put very large batteries on if you need to. And I believe, it's been a while since I put the AA batteries in. It also has AA batteries on the bottom, and we can actually take a look at that. I'm going to power down here. Let's see here. And I'm taking this off the stand here. Yes, it is a Sound Devices Pix E stand. Maybe that's ironic, or maybe it's just funny. I'm not sure. There we go. Get that taken down like that. And then we have, I think, is it 2 AA's or 4? I don't remember. It's been so long. It is a little carriage with 4 AA batteries. Generally, I use these as sort of a bridge, and I use the Sony L series battery on the back as the primary power source. You can also power it via USB-C. Actually, I feel like the Zoom F6 has a better set of powering options than the MixPre 3 and 6, to be honest, built in. That's my personal preference. But yeah, the Zoom F6 does pretty well as far as powering is concerned. So been pretty impressed with that. Okay, let's go back to the main camera here. I'm sorry for all the noise. David, love being able to run interviews lonely with multicam thanks to an F6, Ninja 5s, and their ability to use timecode. Yes, so the timecode, there is a 3.5 millimeter timecode output. I think someone was asking about timecode earlier. In addition to that, it also can connect via Bluetooth to the Atomos timecode system, their products. So that's another little integration there. So in the case of working with the Atomos recorders as well, you can have that timecode integration, which is nice. So you can sync between your audio recorder and the videos that are being recorded to the Atomos recorders. All right, we should probably go to the questions that were submitted ahead of time. Take a look at those.
Well, there's a
couple more. I don't believe there is a Slate except the output. Thanks, Brady. But I definitely a built-in temperature compensated crystal oscillator. Yes, agreed. There is a timecode clock.
And then we'll come back to some others.
Okay, there's some more in the chat, but let us get to these here first. So a couple. Robert said, can you go over the workflow of naming takes by scene, shot, take? In particular, what's the best way to increment take number for multiple takes? So that happens automatically, Robert, as we saw earlier. Is there a good way to handle bad starts, which are often called false takes? Hitting record by accident before the take starts. So we saw that was holding down the menu button and pressing the down arrow button. So got that. So great. Thanks for bringing that over. Next on to Bruce. This is actually a tip, not a question. And this is a question that's actually come up a lot. So if you find that every time you turn on your Zoom F6, or actually most other field recorders in this same league, so the Zoom F8N Pro, Zoom F8, or any of those, even the F4, any of the MixPre series, if you turn it on and it asks you to set the date, what that means is that its internal battery, they have an internal non-user replaceable battery that keeps the clock running. So it keeps track of your date and time and all of your settings. If that battery runs out because you haven't powered up your recorder in a while, what happens is it asks you, hey, can you please set the time and date again? And it's kind of a pain. The way to prevent that is to turn your recorder on every few days. And if you do that, it'll keep that internal battery charged up. If it's been quite a while since you powered it up, what you might want to do, and what Zoom customer support suggested to Bruce, is connect it to a USB power source and leave it on overnight, and it'll definitely charge it up, and that way you won't have to reset it again for a while. Again, powering up your recorder periodically every few days should prevent that from happening in the first place. So good advice there from Bruce. Thanks for that. That can apply to lots of other recorders as well, which do the same thing. Okay, let's come on back to the chat and see what we've got going on there. I'm going to take a sip of water while Danny is looking through the chat here. Okay. Shoji, could the basic advanced section on the MixPre be equivalent to the poly mono stereo file selection on the Zoom F6? Oh, okay, that's a good question. Good point. Actually, yes, it can. Sort of. No, not exactly, but sort of. In basic mode on the MixPre, what happens is the only thing that gets recorded is a stereo mix, period. That's it. On the Zoom F series, when I switch to mono stereo instead of poly, it will still record all of the different tracks, but it will record them to separate files. So it'll put the stereo mix in one file, it'll put track number 1 in a file, track number 2 in a file, and so on and so forth. So they're a little bit different. On the basic mode on MixPre, it's kind of a very, very simple mode when all you need is a stereo mix. So it will not record the isolated channels in basic mode. Hopefully that helps clarify there. All right, Robert, the timecode jack is both in and out, so you need a special Y cable that splits left and right channels. Agreed. Or you can also, in our Zoom F6 review that we did originally, there is also a 3.5 millimeter adapter that you can use to essentially defeat the input if you want to output the timecode, but you want to switch the outputted timecode to the right channel, I believe it is. So that's another thing you can do as well. But yeah, either a Y cable or we linked in our original Zoom F6 recorder review to an adapter you can use to get the timecode out, to jam something else.
This one is a two-part tip.
Okay, two-part tip coming in from Daniela. You said in your review, F6 is not possible for live streaming 32-bit flow. They have done lots with their still updates of the firmwares, lots of improvements there. And I use Gravity Fast lockers from Thomann. Price is just 11 euros instead of 100 euros for a Rycode one. I think that might be a couple topics. But to your point, Daniela, yes, the F6 originally was not able to stream via USB to a computer at 32-bit float, and it can now. They updated that via firmware. So that was an addition that came after my review. So yeah, thanks for that. All right, Eric says, regarding sound bag compatibility, reminds me a bit from last week with the Theos Wireless RX, not as sound bag oriented. Yeah, like I said, I think to a large extent, the Zoom F6 was the first prosumer recorder that I know of that was announced that had 32-bit float recording capability. And I got the impression that when Zoom was in the product development phase. I don't know. I don't have inside information. I can't pretend to say this with any sort of authority. My guess is that they went through and said, well, what's the use case for 32-bit float recording? And one of the use cases that came up was, well, if you're in a situation where the recordist or mixer is not right there at the recorder to adjust gain if necessary, that would be a use case where 32-bit float would be really, really useful. And so I think they were trying to also update their F4 at the same time. Personally, I wish they had kept the F4 as well, or maybe upgraded it to an F4 Pro or something, whatever. But what they did is instead they made this really, really small form factor recorder that you could use in a trunk or on a, put it on a helicopter, and you as the sound recorders were not invited to go on that flight, just the camera and the people that are filming. So in those circumstances, being able to get everything mic'd up, press record, and off they go, that's what they were aiming for here. And I think that's why they made it a very small form factor to make it easy to hide. That's my guess. I think what I'd love to see is a larger format recorder with the same capabilities. I'd love to see, even if it's only 4 input for me personally, a 4 input recorder more with the form factor of the Zoom F8, but with the F6's capabilities would be just brilliant. And then that way they could also put proper timecode input and output ports on it because they'd have room for it. They'd also be able to put a Hiroshi power input potentially. L-series mount, battery mount. That's one thing that the F8N Pro doesn't have, which I wish it had. And also the MixPre. I wish you have to buy a battery sled for the MixPre to use L-series batteries. But anyway, let's go on to the next one. Danny is like, enough already. All right, Mike H. Don't use the Zoom F6, have a Tascam DR60D Mark II and a MixPre 3.2, but always curious about other recorders out there. It's a good thing to be. Curiosity serves us well. Makes us better people. We learn. Are the preamps of the Zoom F8N better than the F6? Is the quality of the sound better? Not that I've noticed. They sound very much the same. And in fact, when I've talked to people at Zoom, they have said that they are basically the same, pretty much the same microphone preamp design. So no major differences there. Can you save settings to the SD card? Good question. You're going to make me reach back into the recesses of my memory. We're going to power this back on. I don't remember, Robert, but we can find out pretty quickly here. Go into the menu. I'm going to come down to System. If I go to SD card, it's not there. If I go to Settings... does anyone else know the answer to this question out there in the chat? If you do, please let us know. I don't remember if that's possible here. Oh, backup settings. Here we go. So I can back up right here. I can take all my current settings. I can give it a name when I'm ready. I save that and it saves it to the SD card. I can load that back in then. You can see there it is right there. You do need to be careful that when you format your card, you don't get rid of the settings file. So just be aware of that and be careful. But yeah, that's how you save your settings as a backup to the SD card. So again, that is in the System menu. Go to System, SD card, Backup Settings, and that's where you can either back up a file or load in an existing backup. Okay. What else have we got going out there? Any other questions? Even if it's not Zoom F6 related, we've got about a little over 10 minutes, so let's check in. Danny has a question.
Yes, can you please change to the live stream view so that I can see if I'm behind on the comments?
Oh, Danny wants to see if she's behind on the comments, so I'm going to go to the live stream view.
Thank you.
Okay.
Nope, looks like I'm caught up.
We're all caught up. Okay.
Do you want to talk about next week's schedule?
Yes, next week's schedule here in the United States, well, probably in many places around the world. Next week is going to be Christmas Eve. We are not going to have a live stream. I apologize for that, but I think it's a good opportunity to go and spend some time with people you love or to get out and do some recording, whatever fits in your particular case. We will be back for a live stream the week after, which will be New Year's Eve, I believe. So we will be back for a live stream then, when we'll probably talk about the gear of the year and predictions for 2024. So don't miss that. If you want to be notified about the upcoming streams and the topics, and you're not already signed up at the school, definitely get over to the school. It's school.learnlightandsound.com. You can sign up for free. We do not do hard sells. We don't do a bunch of marketing emails. Basically, what we do is once a week, we send an email saying, hey, here's the topic for tomorrow. If you have a question you want to submit ahead of time, just reply to the email. And it gives you the link to where the live stream is going to be. That's the bulk of what you'll get from us once a week. Then when the only other thing is when we release a new course, we send an email. We say, hey, we have a new course. This is what it covers. Love to have you sign up. If that sounds like it's of use to you, bye-bye. So we don't do hard sells. We don't sell our email list to anybody else. We're very respectful of that because I despise getting a ton of junk mail that I didn't really sign up for and didn't want.
Okay.
All right, here's the next question. Marvin, have you tried the new Atomos recorders, the Ultra, etc.? What's your opinion on them? I have not. So at work, we are using the, actually, we upgraded those to the Shogun Connect, is it called? I don't remember what they're called. They're the ones that can actually sync with Frame.io, Camera Connect, I think it's called. I don't remember the exact terms they use. But yes, we do use those for recording in our studio at work, and they're fine. No complaints. I don't really nerd out about those, to be honest. They just get a job done for us there at work, and they've been fine. We don't use timecode on them. We just literally are taking a feed from each of our cameras to each of them have their own Atomos recorder. And we actually also feed the audio out of our 833 into each of those recorders so that we have an ISO recording that goes along. And in some cases, many cases actually, when we're just doing kind of a standard recording, when one person's recording at a time, we just use the audio that gets piped into the Atomos recorder. That usually is good enough for us. If we need to do an auto mix or something like that, then we'll take the audio from the Sound Devices 833 if we're doing a recording of multiple people at the same time or whatever the case may be.
We have a request to test the sound library.
We have a request to test sound particles. They are free for students. Okay, well, let me make a note, Danielle. I have not tested them. I'm going to make a note right now. Let's see here. So we're going to take off the managing files on your Zoom F6 because we covered that today, and we're going to take a look at sound particles. Okay, noted. Thank you. We'll come back to that. Brady, as a production audio mixer, do you only use timecode? Any use for genlock or world clock? Timecode is typically what we use, or we're really small, kind of scrappy productions. We don't even use timecode. We just use either a clap or a slate, and use that to sync up the audio. If it's a big, like if I've worked on commercial pieces and short films where we come away with a lot more clips, in those cases we use timecode, but we have not used genlock. Genlock is going to be more useful in cases where, like when they were doing a lot of stereo or 3D films for a while there. I don't know if are there still 3D films? I don't know. It's like in the early mid 2000s, everyone had you go into Best Buy, you look at a new TV, and they were all 3D enabled. And now you go into Best Buy, I don't even know if they have 3D capabilities anymore. It was kind of a fad that passed. But when they did, and they were filming, they had to film stereoscopically, basically with two cameras, and they would use genlock to genlock those two cameras together so that they could confirm that they were actually taking frames. And the distinction between genlock and timecode is that timecode, you jam the timecode generators together, and then you separate them and connect one to a camera, one to an audio recorder, and they're using just high-quality temperature-compensated clocks that can stay in sync throughout the course of a day. But they're not actually generally, although some of the newer ones are now starting to communicate with each other and rejamming periodically. But genlock is actually a single clock that is connected to the two recording devices. In that case, the case I'm giving an example of, two cameras, and it's actually the genlock clock is the one that's telling the cameras when to capture a frame. So they are doing it right in sync. So that'd be really important, of course, if you're doing 3D recording. So that's that. So typically, no, we just use timecode.
Okay, we gotta move here.
Danny says we got to move. Here we go. Speed round. Soren, is there any workaround to do in the same place and the same time timecode by Bluetooth via UltraSync Blue, and also control via iPhone app by Bluetooth. Not that I know of. So the question is whether you can use the Bluetooth timecode and the iPhone app at the same time with the Zoom F6, and I believe the answer is no. You might contact Zoom support to confirm that, but I'm pretty sure the answer is no. Okay, next. Mark, when recording wireless microphones to a Canon C70, 2 tracks, and 2 boom microphones to a MixPre 3, what is the best way to account for latency issues? Audition, Fairlight, something else? Thanks. Well, if you're recording on a MixPre, I believe the MixPre has the ability to apply an input delay. So that would be the best way to do it. If what you want to do as a test is so you'd record with all of them and a camera, do a clap. Well, it's actually a little bit more complicated than this, but you do a clap, and then you check to see how far out of sync each of the recorded channels are or tracks are relative to the visual clap. So you want to, bring it into a video editing app where the hands come together for the clap, or the Slate clapper comes together. Then you want to see how far off each of those waveforms are from the actual visual clap, and then you will apply that offset. So that's the general idea. In more detail, depending on what frame rate you're filming at, you can figure out how many milliseconds that is. So by however many frames it's off. So each second, of course, is 1,000 milliseconds. So if you are filming at 30 frames per second, you divide 1,000 by 30, and that's how many milliseconds each frame is. Hopefully that makes sense, Mark. If you need more details, let me know. We're on the speed realm. When will the next firmware be available? This is from Beto Blanco. We're currently on the Zoom F6 on version 2.0. I have no idea when the next firmware will be available. I don't have inside information at Zoom. I'm not paid by them or representing them in any way, but yeah, I'm not sure. Latest version 2, I think, came out in July of this year. Shoji, off topic, lighting question. Oh, okay. Does Aperture or Amaran make a light that has an adjustment to compensate for the light accuracy as it ages? Some of the newer ones do. It's generally the RGB lights that do. They have a green magenta adjustment. So any of the RGB models, and I think on some of the higher end ones have a green magenta balance as well. So yes, you can adjust those. On the Amaran lights, if it's RGB, yes. If it's not RGB, then no. Generally, what happens to lights over time is they tend to go more green, and so you want to apply a little bit more magenta.
I think this is a suggestion.
Suggestion from Ronnie. Noise reduction for live production. Audio Hijack do include an active noise cleaner that seems to be very potent. We also use noise assist on the MixPre. What about an episode just handling live noise? Okay, fine idea. We did actually cover noise assist previously, but we can come back to that. Noise assist and other live noise reduction options. And this is, this was specifically, you were talking about Audio Hijack. I haven't tried that one yet. So that also is going to depend very much on your workflow. So for example, Audio Hijack is assuming that you're bringing all your audio into your computer, I assume your streaming computer, so you can process it there and then send it over to your encoding app, OBS or some equivalent. David, thank you very much to share passion and knowledge. Bought your course on the F6 a long time ago and still use it very often. Thank you so much, David. Glad you found it helpful. And keep making great sound. Genlock is important for XR, extended reality, to sync cameras to LED walls. Ah, there's another use case for it. Very good. Thank you, Robert. This is again from Beto. I bought a SanDisk Extreme Pro 180 megabits per second. It's not listed in the Zoom verified SDs. Will I have problems? Good question. Let's go back over to the overhead camera quickly. We're going to come into the system menu. There's a little something you can do. Come into the SD card menu, and you can actually do a performance test. The full test, note, will take a while. By while, I mean, depending on the size of the card, it can take an hour. So just be aware of that. You can do a quick test. You can essentially test the card in the recorder itself, and it will tell you if it runs into any errors or issues. So you might want to run that test really quickly on the card that you purchase to see if you have any problems with it. Okay, does that do it? That's it for today. Danny says it's time to go. For those of you that celebrate this time of year, I hope you the happiest of holidays. Get out there, make some great sound, and we will see you in 2 weeks on the eve of the new year. Get out there, make some great sound. Talk to you soon.